I didn't realize how much inflammation I had in my body until it started leaving my body. Depression is a symptom of inflammation in the brain. When you start eating diets, then that inflammation goes away.
If I am at a holiday party or go see my family, like I will eat what is served, right? I feel it in my body after. And that's when I can feel like a headache or the start of a migraine come on. That for me is enough to really, 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 really limit how much I allow that in my body.
Carrie Kelly. He has a massive X following in the low-carb diet community, and he is the guest for today's interview.
Hi, I'm Lindy Louise, and thank you for joining my channel. I'd like to welcome my guest today, Carrie Kelly. Carrie has had an amazing health journey, and he has become somewhat of an internet sensation. I'd say he's definitely one of the darlings in the low-carb community, and community is a great word for that because he's definitely a leader in this space. What started this journey? Firstly, I'd like to point out that one of your tags on X is Standard American Diet Survivor. Where did your journey start about 6 years ago? What ailments were you dealing with, and how did you even learn that you wanted to make a change?
Okay, so around the age of 40, my health just completely fell apart. Prior to that, I was always in decent health, decent shape. I struggled with allergies, but my weight was pretty stable. And at age 40, I was diagnosed with osteoarthritis, and the pain was just crazy in my back every day. Was just trying to bear living with what felt like a railroad spike in my spine. So from that point, from age 40 to age 46 or 47, I started gaining weight, 10 pounds every year. I was eating terribly, and I was eating Motrin, like 3-5 every day, almost every day I worked. And it was just a miserable life, a miserable existence. I didn't care, honestly, to live past the age of 50 because, at least then the pain would be over and the suffering. And I met somebody at age 47 who told me about keto. And I was like, okay, whatever. You ate butter and mayonnaise and lost a bunch of weight. Cool. And I just it was in the back of my mind until maybe a month later when I was taking a walk on a really hot day. And my right arm went numb. I was sweating profusely. And I thought I was having a stroke or a heart attack. And I made it home, and I was really scared. I was like, okay, this is it. I've got to decide to try and make a change in my life and do something about this, or just crawl into a hole and pull dirt of myself. So I remembered that conversation with the guy who tried keto. And I just, on a whim, said, you know what, I'm just going to try it. I'm going to give it a week and see what happens. Hopefully I can lose some weight and start feeling better. And that just opened up an entire new world to me. After just a few days, I started noticing improvements, and my life changed from there forever.
Wow. What were the initial improvements that kept you going? Because changing behavior is really challenging, so it must have been good enough to overcome those challenges.
Absolutely, because I am a very compulsive or almost obsessive type person, and I like doing the same things over and over. I like what I do, and I don't like to deviate. So this was like a big deal to me to try this. And I remember on day 3, the inflammation just really eased up. I mean, I would say 90% of it felt like it was gone. It felt like it had been raining inside my body not my entire life, but maybe for a decade straight. And then just one day it stopped raining, and the sun came out and the birds started singing. And I felt incredible relief. I hadn't even lost a pound. And that right there, I was like, this is for me. I'm not going back.
Wow. So was it the back pain, or was it more than that? When you
Well,
it sounds like it was more than that.
The back pain was just part of it. That's where
Yeah.
most of my pain was, but I had a lot of inflammation in my feet and knees, and I would get really tired after 3 or 4 hours. I have flat feet, and after 3 or 4 hours, I would just ache to the bone, and I would just want to sit down. I'd want to go home. I would take Motrin to, take the sting out of my feet, so I could just continue on a normal work day. And that started just improving dramatically, and I didn't realize how much inflammation I had in my body until it started leaving my body. Like you just started getting 1% more inflammation every day, and you don't realize how much you have in you until it stops.
Wow. So, like, were you, like, when you were seeing, let's say, maybe a doctor or some other healthcare professional about your pain when you were around 40 before you started this, like, what were some of the recommendations that you had tried? And obviously they weren't helpful because you wouldn't have, like, gone down this other path.
Well, I spoke to a young doctor. Initially, I went to the emergency room to make sure there wasn't something, structurally wrong with my spine. So they took X-rays and all that. They said, your spine is fine except for osteoarthritis. So they sent me to a specialist, a young doctor, and this doctor told me basically that the pain was something I was just going to have to get used to. He said that physical therapy, was on the table to build up the muscles around your spine, which that makes sense, and that was good that he did that. But he said that I should probably become good friends with Motrin. That was a terrible thing to say, and he didn't say anything about diet at all. Nothing.
Right. Right. I mean, this really hits home for me. I mean, a lot, because this is my patient population, those with arthritis, and ultimately they come to me because they have just like gotten a new knee or a new hip. And, I talk to my patients because I'm with them for a length of time for a few weeks, and I always ask, like, hey, what was the conversation around diet? And they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, what does that have to do with my arthritis? Right?
Absolutely nothing.
There isn't a conversation. So which is why I love your account so much. Another reason, right? Like, you're reaching so many people who aren't having these conversations, like in like a traditional like medical office where they're seeking help. Instead, they're seeking help from folks like you who have done it and, are willing to share your journey so that, others can improve their health as well. So, like, how did you, when you were like, I'll try this keto thing, like, what were your resources? Like, that's actually one of the questions from your community members, from Wesley. Like, what free resources in the beginning helped you?
Well, I just did a generic search on the keto diet, and I stumbled upon a website called RuledMe, RULEDME.com, and they had a comprehensive ketogenic diet guide, which was amazing. It goes down what foods you should eat and how many carbs and what to expect, and how to increase electrolytes, and all the foods that you should and shouldn't eat. That was a really great guide. I still point people in that direction when they ask me for free resources.
I'll have to link that in the show notes so other
Sure. They've got a guide for keto and carnivore, and I've noticed that recently they've put up a bunch of disclaimers, I guess, to make sure that they're covering their butts, because
Right.
The experts say this and that. So they give you all the information, but they put these possibilities in there.
Right, which we all have to do, right? In
Right.
this day and age. Which, so if someone's not familiar with you, like, you are working on a cookbook. And that was another question from one of your community members. I can't remember the name of that person. Warrior Princess is asking, when is your cookbook coming out? You and I have kind of talked offline a little bit about this. I know you've been working hard on it.
Well, a good friend of mine, Sarah, is working on it, and she's telling me that before the first snow falls. that this should be done. Some of the work she's done on this is really outstanding. The photos and making the pictures just really pop out. I'm like, wow, that's my stuff. It's just crazy.
Wow.
So I'm trying to be patient, but I'm kind of a little giddy and excited. Like Christmas is right around the corner, so I'm trying to keep that under my hat and be patient.
Well, I think this is a great time of year too. Like a lot of people are like super motivated towards January, the start of a new year. So
right.
I think this is like perfect timing. So you say like this like rain went away and it started to shine into sunshine in your body. And that was, pain. Like what other things improved? Like what, someone might start this sort of diet to address pain and maybe some weight loss. But what are some of the other things that like are unexpected that like you're like, whoa, like I wish I would have known about this earlier?
Well, my outlook on life, I was constantly depressed. I was very pessimistic, very sarcastic. But I was sarcastic with class. I was pretty funny, I think. But I don't know. I just changed. Every day became a new adventure, and I started looking at the bright side of things. And it's weird because go through my whole adult life being this person and thinking that's who I am, but that was just me on a terrible diet whose hormones weren't necessarily behaving the way they were supposed to. And then all of a sudden you discover what normal really feels like. And hey, I'm like, I guess this is really me. That wasn't me. I was kind of a jerk at times, very impulsive, rash, would say things, would getting arguments with people over the stupidest things. I would just snap. I would keep things inside and I would just snap over like, something just completely stupid that you're going to forget about in a couple months.
Wow.
And that doesn't happen to me anymore.
That's amazing. So have you been able to repair any relationships in your life because of this?
I've always been pretty good about that in the past. I realize when I screw up and I try to make good on it and, hey, and say, hey, sorry about the other day. This is what I was going through and, it was stupid. Like, can we please get over this? And most of my friends, are cool with that because they do it too. That's being hangry. They get it. And interestingly enough, a lot of something that I've learned recently is that depression is a symptom of inflammation in the brain. And when you start eating non-inflammatory diets, then that inflammation goes away and you start, thinking and feeling better. It's pretty wild. Didn't even expect that.
Yeah, you're definitely not the first person I've met on the internet that's explained that or has experienced that with depression being lifted through a change in diet and lifestyle. Have you read Dr. Chris Palmer's book, Brain Energy? I know you've obviously heard of it and are familiar with his work.
It's on my it's in my shopping cart. Actually, I'm reading a couple of different books right now, and I always shied away from psychology because I thought it was boring. To be frank. But I've taken a lot of interest in things that I never thought I would be interested in, like biochemistry and medical conditions that I'm not even ever going to get, female medical conditions, but I just find them very fascinating now and how they relate to diet. So anyway, the psychology book, Chris Palmer, I'm definitely going to read that in the future.
Yeah, it's on my list too. I've listened to him on a few podcasts and I've followed his work on X, probably like yourself. And it's just amazing. And it's even more amazing to hear stories of like real people who have followed his recommendations of a ketogenic diet and oh, I was on antidepressants for 20 years and now I'm not, right?
Right.
For 20 years, I had people tell me that this was a drug I'd be on for the rest of my life. And now I don't take any drugs. So I really respect his work. So like you, I'd like to read his book, but I do
I
believe
just
he
listened
ended.
to his podcast today with Dr. Westman. It was several
Oh,
months
wow.
back, and it was really
Okay.
interesting how he his mother had a lot of mental problems, and that kind of inspired him to go into the field. And
Yeah.
it was really interesting how his career evolved when he started eating low carb and understanding, how food was affecting not just our bodies but our brains.
Yeah, that's amazing. You'll have to share that, and I'll link that for listeners if they're interested in listening to
Sure.
that. So you are super interesting because not only are you like a leader in the low carb carnivore space, but you're like a butcher. So like people come to you for a lot of questions about meat. So can you talk a little bit about that? And there were definitely a lot of questions from your community, like how has that shaped like your role?
Well, I've always had an interest in cooking. I cooked for 28 years in the restaurant industry, and it went from cooking all these unhealthy things to suddenly I'm, pushing beef on people and finally feeling better about, what I'm serving people. Uh, that's a big plus in my life that, you know, I'm finally able to, stop poisoning people because a lot of
Yeah.
the restaurants I worked in, they use seed oils and all this crap that you really don't want to know about. So it's been a really interesting journey. I try to learn something new all the time. We get all these representatives from like certified Angus beef that come in and talk to us, and they've always got fascinating things to tell us. And I try to make notes to to share with my followers and stuff because they seem to really like this stuff. And
Yeah.
so
Do you have any favorite cuts yourself? And then for like maybe someone who's listening who's not great in the kitchen, like what are some, easy meats to bring home to start with if you're intimidated by cooking, especially because meat's expensive, right? So you don't want to mess it up at home.
right. Well, oh, I'll start with saying my favorite is probably the ribeye, although I've been kind of burned out on it lately because I've only eaten about 500 of them in the last 6 years. So I've shown, oh, I've gotten not interested, but I've been leaning more towards chuck eyes because they're half the price of ribeyes. And a chuck eye is basically the very tail end of the ribeye loin. So
I didn't know that.
it's a baby ribeye or a poor man's ribeye, and they're so much cheaper. I've never had a bad chuck eye steak, but I've had tough ribeyes, and that depends on where in the loin the steak comes from. If it's to one end of the steak, it's closer to the strip side, the New York strip side, and if it's towards the other side, it's toward the chuck roast side, and the strip side is a little tougher. So, um,
Does that cut go by another name or is it always chuck eye in the grocery store?
chuck eye steak, not to be confused with a chuck steak. A chuck
Ooh,
steak
okay.
could be any part of the chuck roast, and the chuck eye is a very tender is the most tender part of the chuck roll, which is where the all the chuck roasts come from,
Okay.
and the chuck eye steaks. Um, I've got a diagram of that on X somewhere. I'll try to share that with you in our DMs or something if you're
Yeah, that'd be
interested.
great. I'm sure a lot of your community would like that too. That'd be a good thing for your cookbook as well.
Right. Um, the easiest way to cook any cut of beef is to just get a roast. If you don't know how to cook, you can certainly throw a little bit of seasoning or salt onto a roast, sear it in a pan, and put marks on it, and then throw it into a pressure cooker or a Dutch oven. Put a cup of broth or water in it, cover it, and cook it slow and low for 4 or 5 hours until it falls apart. If it's in a Dutch oven, if it's in a instant pot or pressure cooker, you can cook that thing in like an hour and a half. A half 30 minutes for every half pound, which is crazy because I'm just used to cooking stuff all day long. But this uh, pressure cooker just is such a game changer.
Do you is the end product the same in your opinion? Like, do you like one versus the other?
The end product is the same.
Okay.
Once if you cook a piece of meat long enough, any piece of meat, once it gets over 202 degrees, it's going to fall apart.
Hmm.
The muscles and the ligaments and everything, they just tenderize, and the meat just dissolves. And who doesn't like fork tender meat? And if you have that a little bit of broth or water in there with it, it's just gonna be like it will steam cook it, and that broth is just delicious too.
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite things to drink is like the leftover broth from like
Mm-hmm.
a slow roasted meat like that. Drink it all
Yep,
week. It tastes better than bone broth to me, and I really love like all the jiggly
it
collagen.
does. And if you buy like bone broth from the grocery store, I was just talking to someone about this. You never see the jiggly stuff in any
Right. Why
store
is
bought
that,
bone
you
broth.
think?
I've wondered that too, and my guess is they water it down so much
Mm.
that we're not getting that concentrated bone broth. And I think if somebody did sell a jiggly gelatinous product, I would totally buy it. I mean,
Yeah, right.
that's where all the collagen is, or
Right.
and the gelatin.
Maybe that should be your next project.
What make putting out a jiggly
Yeah,
bone
go
broth?
after Kettle and Fire. I
Right.
mean, their bone broth is fine, but it's really expensive, and
It
my
is very
method would taste
expensive.
better if you could figure the jiggly part out. I think
Hmm.
that's your ticket to retirement right there, Carrie. Back to being a butcher. From the other side of this, like people who are really against eating meat, like what sort of hate do you get from your lifestyle, right? Like you eat a lot of meat because it's better for your body. It's cured all the ailments that you could ever imagine. So, like, what is your response to someone who is, still vegetarian and thinks that that's like just the best thing for every human?
Oh, right. I get the meat is murder. You're destroying your arteries. You're you're selfish for consuming something that is destroying the earth, and I just hear it all the time, and I just point to people. You know what? This meat eating thing, this food chain has been going on for hundreds of thousands of years with humans, and you can participate or you can sit on the sidelines. It makes no difference to me. I just know that I feel my best when I eat meat, and I'm here to live my best life. I've suffered for most of my life, and I'm done with that. These people tell me that I can be healthy and thrive on vegetables, and I'm sorry, but all my allergies and digestive problems, all those went away when I minimized vegetables. Some things I can handle, but like green vegetables, if I don't cook the crap out of them, it's playing Yahtzee to see how it's going to react in my stomach and how it comes out. So I'm just going to keep doing what makes me feel my best. And as for everything, my diet causing environmental problems, I think it's all a bunch of crap
Right.
because these animals have been here for longer than we have, and the earth has got along just fine with millions and millions of ruminants walking around eating grass and farting. I mean, just look
Right.
at where these animals on regenerative farms look at the scenery, and tell me that they're destroying the planet, and I'm just going to laugh at you. I'm sorry.
Right. I wish like more of this group and I used to be part of that group. I was a vegetarian um in my early 20s. I'm 40 now, and I suffered debilitating migraines. Like the kind where like you couldn't go to school or work, right?
Mm.
And was like impacting my relationships with people too, right? Oh, Lindy has another migraine. And they were happening like multiple times a month. And I look back and I thought I was eating this pristine diet of, organic vegetables, but I was also eating like, the packaged like vegetarian garbage, right?
Right.
And I think a lot of my problems were maybe missing out on like protein, or not maybe, definitely. But I think also all of like the ultra packaged garbage that comes with a lot of vegetarian lifestyles, right? Or vegan lifestyles. So, whole other topic, but I do get that feeling of caring for animals or caring for the environment, but I just don't believe that anymore about the environment, right? Like if you
Right.
look at a regenerative farm and understand anything about ecosystems, no one with common sense could go to a farm like Force of Nature in Texas and see the restoration that's happened on that piece of land and say, this is not right. Right.
Right.
Like I recently heard them on a podcast and they took this like pretty desolate piece of land in Texas. Their story is actually pretty cool. And like bald eagles returned, right? Like grasses. They see foxes and rabbits and all sorts of wildlife like living together on their land now. And before it was just, like a place where you'd see tumbleweeds, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm with you. And I hope the message on regenerative farming and its practices and how it's actually good for the ecosystem and environment and the soil becomes more popular. Or
right. Remove the ruminant and the soil dies and the plants don't thrive quite as much and it doesn't rain as much and it's all intricately connected, and when you try to remove the biggest player from it, then you're asking for big problems. Of course, factory farms are something that we could improve upon, but even still, those factory farms are just a part of the ruminant's life. It's not the entire life of the ruminant. The ruminant spends, the first part, maybe half of its life, I think, on real grass, just like you're intended to, and it's not all horror. But these regenerative farms that raise 100% grass fed, the animal only has one bad day in its life, or two if you're a male. One other thing. Are your migraines gone?
They
said
are.
they
They're
are.
amazing. And I noticed that, I'm not completely dogmatic, right? Like if I am at a holiday party or go see my family, like I will eat what is served, right? And sometimes it's more like party food, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel it in my body after. And that's when like I can feel like a headache or the start of a migraine come on.
Mm.
And that for me is enough to really, 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 really limit how much I allow that in my body, because it's not worth it. It's like, kind of like what you've experienced. Like once you feel what normal should feel like, it's really hard to go back, right? Once that brain fog is gone, or your migraines are gone, or your back pain or your knee pain, or whatever it is that you're experiencing, your depression is gone. Like that's enough to just keep you going. Even
Absolutely.
in the face of like people saying like, oh, your diet's so restrictive and it's not sustainable. So that's actually a really good segue. Like for the people in your life, how have you dealt with that? Because I know that not everybody in your life is eating like an animal-based diet, or I would imagine they aren't, right? Because we live in the real world.
Right.
Like, so how do you deal with that? Because that was a common question that came up when I was asking, viewers like what they were interested in asking you. Like, what are some tips to, learn if you're about to start out on eating more of an animal-based diet?
Well, it's a lonely choice. It's a lonely road when you decide to go animal-based or real food-based, when everyone around you, your friends and family, are, just eating themselves into metabolic syndrome with, nobody out there really understands. They all point their fingers and say, oh, you're going to get diabetes, or you're going to give yourself a heart attack. Not eating, that's not good for you. Not eating your vegetables, that's not good for you. And it just goes on and on and on and on, and then eventually you stop talking about it. At first you want to tell everybody, say, hey, I feel amazing, I want to share this with you. You should start this journey. You should try this because, it just makes life so much easier. And then they look at you like, you have a third eyeball on your forehead. And I learned after a while that it's just not worth it. I can just do my best and be me. And, as far as I'm concerned, I would pretend like I live on an island, and the foods that I eat were the only foods available, and everything else was not food. And and now when I look at, these foods that they're eating, like cake or whatever, have a piece, live a little, and then I'm like, I'd rather not. That's dying a little. And I just look at it like, you know what, I'm betraying myself if I eat that, because I know what my life was like when I ate those things, and I didn't want to live very long. So that makes it easy for me to stay on track. Um, I even permit myself, I let myself have a Coke at 5 years. I promised myself if I stayed low carb for 5 years, I could have a Coke. And I took 2 sips and I couldn't stand it. It was completely different. The taste, the sugar. I don't know if they changed the formula, but it was terrible. And after that, I didn't ever crave a Coke again. I just don't want anything to do with it, because my taste buds are different, and it's just not on the table anymore. I see it, and it does nothing for me.
Yeah, I hear you. I feel like this is there's a common theme here. Like your palate changes, your how you self-soothe yourself changes, right? You learn more
Hmm.
about yourself. Like maybe back in the day, you would have had a Coke after a long day, right? And what do you do now? Like, what are your treats now? Like treats, not necessarily like what you eat or drink, but like what is something that you reward yourself with?
Treating myself.
Even if it's like something like taking a walk or going to see a movie, like what do you do that makes you feel rewarded now?
Getting out in nature.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Taking, running along the river, and just smelling fresh air and hearing the birds and feeling the sun on my skin. That's a treat. It relaxes me, and it makes me realize I was tense, and I didn't realize I was as tense as I was until I just get out there and forget about everything. Um, that's a treat for my soul, a treat for my palate. I really enjoy the foods that I eat. So if I want to really, really enjoy something, and have it be special to me, I'll just fast all day and not eat. And then when I sit down to eat, everything tastes amazing when you don't eat for a day or two. That's what I tell people. If you're getting bored with your diet, try not eating for a day, and come back to the table and see how it appeals to you then.
Yeah, that's really good advice for someone who feels like they're like kind of stuck in a rut or bored with it. So I'm sure a lot of people want to know, what does a typical day look like for you when you're not fasting? What are you eating?
When I'm not fasting, well, right now I'm on this rotation where I I eat one meal a day when I work,
Mm-hmm.
and that's after work or before work, because I close a couple nights a week. And then on my days off, I eat twice a day.
Okay.
But I've been eating one meal a day so much that I'm not really hungry on for the first meal on my day off. So I'm eating kind of smaller meals. Doing OMAD has really been a eye opener for me. I've been doing this for a couple of months. So yeah, that's pretty much all I'm doing now. There were times in my life or times in my journey where, I would eat windows. I'd try eating, from noon to 4 or 5 o'clock, and that was, I don't know. I just feel better when I have a full meal and not, graze for 4 or 5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'll permit myself like prosciutto with cheese, like after I come home from work and I'm not really ready to eat dinner. I might do something like that, but otherwise I don't snack. I just eat meals.
Yeah. I think the eating window is going to look different for everybody, right?
Right.
Some people like to eat within an 8-hour window of 3 meals. Some people like one meal a day. I think that, playing around with it and figuring out what works best for you is key. Because every person is different, right?
Right. And I like Jason Fung's advice as far as eating goes, and that's to mix things up. it best aligns with how our ancestors
Yeah.
evolved and ate. They didn't always eat at 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock. They ate when they found food, and that could have been at
Right.
any time.
Right. Yeah. Or you're also eating like when you're hungry, and you can intuitively eat like that if you're sticking to real whole foods, not, the standard American diet, junk
Right.
foods and Doritos and whatnot.
Because you're always hungry then.
Yeah, you're always hungry. You're never satiated. Biggest comeback, first name Chris, has a question for you. Oh, he has a big following like yours, because he's helped a lot of people through his diet and lifestyle change. And he was wondering how your mom's battle with cancer, and then he said your dad's early death, which I didn't know about it. Like, did that shape your views on health and then the choices that you've made in your life in any way?
Well, I will say that my mother's death recently. She died a couple years ago
I'm sorry.
of she had heart problems during a cancer diagnosis, and she had heart surgery a couple months before her death, and they're calling it a cancer death, not a heart disease death. And I don't know. I kind of feel like it could go either way.
Sure.
But anyway, her death has showed me how precious the time that I have left is, and I just don't want to waste any of my days. I feel like if I don't learn something, if I don't get stronger, or if I don't help somebody, or I don't, do something positive in my day, I feel like I've wasted that day. Of course we need our days to reset and relax, and I try to remember that. But for the most part, I try to do something positive with my day, and that really keeps me going. It doesn't exhaust me because as I'm sure when you eat a proper diet, you just have continuous energy. You don't
Right.
you don't go up and down. You just stay busy while you're awake, and it's very easy for me to try and do positive things because I get that oxytocin reward, and that just helps self-perpetuate it all.
Right. When you feel good, it's a lot easier to keep going. And I think that's where like the people who say that this sort of lifestyle isn't sustainable are wrong. And it makes me question if they've ever tried anything like it. Right.
Right. They haven't when they're telling you all this, it's going to kill you. Well, obviously you haven't done it because you would know
Right.
that it does the opposite of that.
Right. And it's like you were saying, like when this rain went away and the sun came out in your body, that analogy you used, it's like you didn't even know what that sun felt like before. So
Right.
some people have just never felt it. I'm actually kind of experiencing that right now. I love coffee, and I'm never going to give it up completely. But I'm dealing with some clenching and grinding of my teeth at night, and I've played around with a lot of things. And I was like, you know what? I'm finally going to see if caffeine intake is involved, right? So I'm limiting myself to 1 cup of coffee in the morning, which is hard for me because I like 2 or 3. It has helped tremendously. And then the bonus is like I feel less anxious during the day, which I wasn't expecting.
Right.
And I feel way more patient with my patients. And I feel patient most of the time, but sometimes we lose our patience when things get hard, especially in today's healthcare. And that really has kept it going because I want a second cup of coffee, but I'm like, nope, today I want to feel less anxious. I don't want to clench and grind my teeth at night. And I want to feel more calm for my patients and then my family. And I think it's just a reminder to like try something new. And before you say like, oh, that's not for me, like see how it feels in your body.
Right.
And then make that choice.
I quit coffee going on 2 years in December, and I wasn't a huge coffee drinker. I would have my 12 ounces every morning, but some of the things I noticed were I wasn't anxious because I was always be anxious, after I had my coffee all morning long, just like jittery, like not able to, just drop my shoulders back and relax. And That's gone. I started drinking decaf, so I still get
Nice.
the ritual part, that that I want to, just do every morning. So I still get that fix, but I don't miss the caffeine at all. And my gut microbiome is so much more calmer.
Hmm.
Um, I never hear noises coming out of my stomach. When I drink coffee, it would almost feel slightly upset, but not intolerable. And, I always just dealt with it because in the past, if I would drink more than 12 ounces of coffee with caffeine, I would have an upset stomach, but not anything that I would have, require me to take something. It would just, it would just be, I would know it was there. Anyway, all that is gone. My stomach has never been calmer in my
Wow.
life since I quit coffee, but I do drink decaf, like I said. And as far as the teeth grinding goes, I was a major grinder when I slept, and I don't do that anymore. And
That's incredible.
I'm not going to say it was the coffee. Maybe it was, but
Do you think it was your change in diet?
I think it was. But maybe caffeine was part of it because I drink a lot of soda
Mm.
when when I ground my teeth, and I cut drinking out soda, and I just, like I said, limited it to 1 12-ounce cup of coffee a day. Maybe that was enough to make the grinding go away. But anyway.
All right. Well, thanks for that tip. These are things I'm going to try. And I like this idea of like subbing with decaf because I really do like that ritual. And for me, coffee is like a social part of my life, right?
Mhm.
Like having a cup of coffee on the weekends with someone you love, or like my mom and dad. Like that's what we do. So I like that there's like a substitute that doesn't necessarily have the caffeine. Again, nothing against caffeine, but for me personally, I'm having an issue with it, so I'm willing to try, and it sounds like it helps you too. So you talked about like your meal frequency. Like, what are you eating? Is your meal look the same every day? I know you said you're like a little burned out on ribeyes, but like, do you eat eggs? It sounds like you eat prosciutto and cheese. Like, what are some of your favorite foods? Like, some ideas for people who are like new to this, right?
80% of my diet is beef. I
Mm,
eat a lot of ground beef. I have 5 or 6 different ways I can prepare ground beef: burgers with cheese, taco bowls. I'll make a dish where I just cook ground beef and mix in bacon and throw eggs on top of it. I can eat that, 3 4 days a week, and it costs less than $10. So you
right.
can't beat that.
Never gets
Um,
old either. It's just always
right.
so good.
I don't eat a lot of pork except bacon. I don't feel my best when I eat those things. It's like in the past when you feel like when you eat a bunch of greasy pizza or something, you just kind of feel, ugh.
Hmm.
And I get that way with pork sometimes. So I
Right.
try not to eat a ton of pork just because that's how it makes me feel. Chicken, I eat chicken 2 or 3 times a month. Um, my problem with chicken is it's very hard to get clean chicken
Hmm.
that isn't been bleached and has God
Right.
knows what in it. But I just whenever I eat chicken, I just don't feel satiated for very long. It's because I'm sure it's because there's not a lot of fat in it, and
Right.
protein is just one component of satiety. You got to
Hmm.
have some of that fat in there to make your hormones happy. And
Right.
I'll just wake up really hungry the next day every time I try to have a chicken dinner. But I do enjoy it sometimes.
Do you eat any? I mean, I know this is like a big, thing with like the animal-based diet, carnivore diet. People are like, oh, but this person's gonna die because they're not getting fiber. So, like, what has your life been without fiber? What has it been like?
Oh man.
I think there's a lot of confusion about this, and like people think that that's like the
Well,
only way to prevent cancer.
TMI, but I use half as much toilet paper as I used to. I'm in the bathroom a third of the time that I used to be because things didn't always, flow right. I was not constantly bloated and constipated, but at least I would say, 3 or 4 times a month, I would not be comfortable from eating a bunch of fiber. And I never put it together that, it was fiber congesting me. I thought it was just digestive issues, that I needed more fiber to, make things flow smoothly, because, that's what everybody says. You need fiber to go regularly and all that. And I just, it was one of those eye-opening things when I did the opposite of what they said, and I didn't care about fiber. I've gone, weeks and weeks and weeks without any appreciable amount of fiber in my diet, and it hasn't hurt me one bit.
In fact, it sounds like you feel better, which is
right.
And I think a lot of people would say, well, that's short-sighted, right? Like, you're going to get colon cancer. So what do you say to that? I'm just bringing up these things that I see people get attacked from the internet all the time, and I don't agree with them.
All the studies that conclude or hypothesize that lack of fiber causes colon cancer, and eating a bunch of red meat, not cleaning it out with fiber, all of that is based on observational studies.
Right.
They're questionnaires, and you can take a questionnaire and focus on what they eat and ignore everything else and say, well, it's the red meat and it's the lack of fiber, when they're eating all this other crap that you completely ignored. So I'm not buying it. It's really weak evidence. So that's what I tell people.
Take your food questionnaires and go somewhere else. Right.
Right.
Nutrition science is very difficult to study, right? Because, people lie in these questionnaires. There's some memory problems. Even the questionnaires themselves, like, meat is often lumped in as part of like lasagna or like a hot dog with a bun and ketchup and Coke and fries. So I'm with you. I think that, I think people forget, like, okay, this person's blood pressure has gone down. They've lost weight. They no longer have depression. They're no longer on medication, right? Like, what are you worried about? Like, all of the risk factors for diabetes, heart disease, Alzheimer's are gone. So why are we so hung up on these things? So I think it's a problem. I do get why people are concerned about it, but, I talk to people like you, or I talk to people like Mimi, or Chris, biggest comeback, and like, you've changed your lives for the better. Or myself, right? I don't have migraines anymore, right? Like, I haven't had one since I got my COVID booster, which is a whole other story. That was a long time ago. That really shifted that was really the big start of my journey on how we got here today. But that's a story for another time. But one of the questions that people wanted to ask you was, you talk a lot about, how you feel better, but like, how has your body changed? Like, did you lose a lot of weight? Is it easier for you to gain muscle? Do you have more energy for like your gym sessions?
Well, when I began this journey 6 years ago, I'll start by saying that I couldn't run 50 yards without my belly wanting to slap me in the chin. I had a lot of abdominal fat. I'm going to say I was maybe 50 to 60 pounds overweight. I quit weighing myself a couple years before I hit rock bottom, just because I got depressed. I saw 210 on the scale, and I'm like, wow. And I didn't jump on a scale after that for a couple years. So I was probably 220, 225. And I lost 40-ish pounds in 6 months.
That's incredible.
Of my my ketogenic journey. I started as keto, and then I eventually gravitated towards more and more meat, to where I'm currently maybe 95% carnivore. And I didn't lose that proverbial last 10 pounds until I started running and working out. I can credit biggest comeback Chris for inspiring me to try running. It started with me like saying, let me see if I can run down to the store, and that was a half mile away, and I was like, I did it, wow. And I hated running in the past, and I'm like, well, let me see if I can go a little further and a little further and a little further. Next thing you know, I ran a half marathon, and then I ran 15 half marathons in a year, and 1,000 miles in 1 year.
That's amazing.
That was the year my mother had cancer, and I what motivated me to do that was, I'm like, if I can do something miraculous, maybe something miraculous can happen to my mom. And it didn't work out that way, but I learned things about myself that, I'm not too old. I was 53 years old when I ran 1,000 miles in a year, and I actually ran a marathon, unofficial marathon, but it was 26.2 miles, and that's something nobody can take away from me. And
No, that's
and
amazing.
what else? What a part was the question? Let's see.
No, I
Oh,
mean,
exercise.
yeah,
I go to the gym 3 or 4 times every day. It was every day, but my work is a little more hectic and I don't have the time. But I go every morning before work, a half hour, 30, 45 minutes. And I don't know, I just love that when I go and be consistent in the gym, I look in the mirror, I'm like, who is that? Because, I see muscle being put on my body like never before in my life. I always struggled to put muscle on my body, and I never realized that it was because I didn't eat enough protein. I,
yeah.
I always had, good desire and a good work ethic when it came to working out, but I never saw results, so I gave up. But once I started doing this at the age of 53 and started seeing results, and I was like, wow, this really works. And I'm like, if I can do this, someone who couldn't do it his whole life, then anybody can do this.
That's great. Well, I want you to keep sharing because you've helped me. You have like over 50,000 followers, which is really hard to gain. And why that's important is because it just shows like how many people you are helping, right? And I believe that the health of this country is going to come from people like you just sharing their story,
And you,
because it's not really happening in the doctor's office anymore, or the talking with your nurse or your dentist, whoever you're talking about. And I don't think it's because these people don't want to help people. I don't think they have the tools to help people. And I don't think that they have, the open mind to help people, because we are so indoctrinated by what we learn in school. And I was a part of that group. And I'm really just glad that I started to meet people like you who opened my eyes to a new way of treating my patients, and treating my own body. If someone's on a budget, which is most people, um, what are some things that they should be putting in their grocery cart this week if they feel encouraged to start eating more animal protein next week in an effort to, help whatever that they are dealing with?
ground beef, eggs, bacon. Shop the sales. Like this week at my grocery store, chuck roasts are $4.99 a pound. You
Wow.
can get a couple of pounds of ground beef, a couple pounds of roast, and have dinner tonight and tomorrow night. Scramble some eggs to have with it, and you're looking at having meals for less than $10 per meal. And when you stop snacking and drinking things besides water and coffee, you're going to save a lot of money there.
Mhm.
That adds up. When I did some math and figured out that when I was eating the standard American diet and I was, waking up and having um, a sandwich and an orange juice and a coffee from McDonald's, and then having a snack a couple hours later, and then having a light lunch, and then having another snack, and then eating dinner, I was spending probably 10 or 15 more dollars per day than I am now.
That adds
It's
up.
yeah, it adds up. You literally spend less money when you eat nutrient dense food because you're not hungry all the time. So
I agree. And like snacks are expensive now, right? Like, I don't even know what a box of Cheez-Its is these days, but it's probably $6, right?
right. I've done some
Minimum.
math, and like by the pound, Lay's potato chips cost more than most steaks do.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm with you on the ground beef. Like, we make like beef, or I'm the cook at home. Make these like beef bowls for lunch, and it's basically just beef and some salt, maybe some avocado. I like sauerkraut. I put that in there. It fills me up. It keeps me going. It doesn't make me want to take a nap after, and it saves me a lot of money. And it's delicious, and I
Yep.
never get sick of it. So I think that people should follow your YouTube channel. Definitely look into your cookbook when it comes out, hopefully in the next couple months, it sounds like. I think you're a great resource for if you're interested in like a more animal-based diet. I cook all things on my channel, but I am lower carb, so because I believe that that's a key to staying healthy, especially if you are not that active, right? because a lot of
Right.
people work and just like simply don't have time to be as active as they would like to be. Any like closing thoughts for somebody just starting out or who's nervous about, making this big shift with their own health?
Just remember that, despite what everybody's telling you, you're eating a real food diet.
Mhm.
The foods that our ancestors ate for 300,000 years, and all the people that tell you that this is going to kill you. Look at what they're eating. They
Yeah.
really have no business telling you shouldn't eat a proper human diet, or what we know is a proper human diet, because they believe in the standard American diet, eating the rainbow, eating a well balanced diet, high carbs, and all this other nonsense. Try it. Try different things. Maybe more of this or more of that works best for you. Experiment, but step outside the traditional way of thinking, because look what it's getting people. It's
Yeah.
it's it's crazy out there. Everyone's sick, and you don't
Yep.
have to live
Everyone's
that
sick.
way.
You don't. I have a never ending list of patients, and I don't see that stopping anytime soon. And I wish people were a little bit more open minded to changing. And I think that if you do meet somebody who asks you questions like, hey, like, what did you do? Like, for people like you or anybody else who's made a change and like people are starting to notice, like, really put all your energy into that person instead of the people who are, not interested, right? They don't want to
Right.
hear it. They're not ready. You're going to feel better. And because it can be a lonely place when you're just promoting real whole foods as opposed to starting the day with like Raisin Bran or something like that. So,
Hmm. Yeah.
anyway,
I feel like you need a sense of desperation, a little dose of panic, because I didn't want to listen to any of it either until I felt like I had a stroke, and I may
yeah,
not live much longer if I don't change my ways. That's a pretty big motivator, and I feel blessed in a way that happened to me, because if it didn't happen to me, I probably would have continued doing what I was doing, because I didn't have something to slap me in the face and say, "Wake up, dude! You're killing yourself."
yeah. And I think like don't be afraid to like try a diet that has a name or just stick to real whole foods, right? Like
Right.
if you're, just I think that is like the ultimate rule. Stick to real whole foods. I don't care if it's keto, carnivore, ketovore, paleo,
Absolutely.
Whole30, whatever it is. The
Real
common
food.
theme is real whole foods. For you, it was keto. For me, it was like Whole30 when it was popular. I was like, oh, maybe this will help my headaches, and I stayed, with that whole food thing, and it changed my life, and it changed yours too. So, thank you so much for your time. I know your time is really valuable, and I hope that if you're listening and you've been inspired by Carrie's story, follow him on Twitter. Like he's putting out really good inspirational content every day. It keeps me going, and not only that, he's a part of an amazing community of people who have made others and definitely made me feel less alone in this world. So, thanks again for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your weekend, Carrie.
Thank you, Lindy. I appreciate you.
Thank you.